Hello and welcome to the Anomaly Project, the show that looks at all aspects of the paranormal and anomalous world. I'm Marcus Louth, and the first thing you'll notice is my co-host Steve Mera won't be with us this evening. However, he will be back next week. However, we still have a fantastic show ahead of us. Now, joining us this evening is paranormal researcher, author, host of Seriously Strange, and a member of Somerset Paranormal Investigators, Caroline McKendrick-GIBSON. Caroline, thank you very much for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. And thank you for inviting me to come on your show.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. I'm looking forward to speaking with you now. We've got lots we can go through. So I think the best place to start, Caroline, is what dragged you into the world of the paranormal in the first place? What hooked you in, basically?
What dragged me in was being the age of 10 years old, living in a Victorian four-floored house in Weymouth. Things were happening in there that obviously someone of my young age didn't understand. And there was nobody really around to answer those questions because my dad isn't a believer in anything paranormal, and my mum is, but she keeps a very closed lip because she doesn't want people to think that we're nuts if she talked about stuff that she's experienced. So my journey obviously started from that early age where I was watching programs, reading books, trying to find answers. And then obviously when I couldn't find answers and just got bogged down the rabbit hole a little bit more, I started to research things myself and investigate through having a paranormal team.
I mean, it's interesting you mentioned that, you experience things from a young age. Now, Steve, for example, he often is, he focuses in on exactly that sometimes people are almost kind of cold. Do you think it was just coincidence? Do you happen to be in a house, or do you think it's something maybe within your chemical makeup, within your mindset, that maybe you can experience these things? What are your thoughts on that, if any?
I've got a very clear memory of the houses that I had, the two houses that I had before that for a long period of time. Neither one of those did I have any experiences that I would question, neither one.
Okay.
And then the house after that directly, we owned that house in Weymouth. It's now been made into flats. Good luck to anybody who's living there, by the way, now, because that was hell.
Right, okay.
So the place that we had after that, and at the same time that we moved into, never had any experiences there. And then following from that, I moved with my late husband. Never had any experiences in any of the houses that I had in between that childhood one and my last house. And my last house, I had 2 months of nothing happening. My husband died, and then stuff happened.
Right.
So I haven't always had house, I don't go from house to house to house.
Right.
This one, when he died, I wanted to move somewhere that was no memories so that I could have a clean start a
Yeah.
couple of years after he passed, because it had too many memories in the last house. And when I walked in, it was lovely and it was calm and it was beautiful feeling and it was very homely. And almost instantly stuff started happening. And it was the same kind of things that happened when he passed in the last house. So I'm not sure if they're, because ghosts haven't been proven to be real yet. Nothing has categorically stated that they are 100% real. So, is it him trying to get a message to us to say, yes, the veil's thin, we can speak, we can communicate? I don't know, but it's very strange. Through investigating this house, I have found that the previous owners did have problems here as well.
Right.
I haven't contacted her yet, but I do intend to contact the last owner and ask, because even though I've been here 9 years, I've got 9 years worth of log data. It's kind of really, it's gone a bit odd in the last couple of weeks, really
Oh.
odd.
In what way, if you don't mind me asking?
It's not pleasant anymore.
Oh, okay.
Um, because before, being a hardened paranormal investigator, there's not a great deal that would bother me, but we're being woken up all through the night, all through the day, with like something sounding like pounding coming from the walls.
Right, okay. So it's obviously
Yeah.
it's unsettling. I mean, firstly, sorry to hear about your husband passing away. I just want to say that. Off the back of that, and possibly you've experienced when you were younger, and again, I'm sure you've come across this in your own research. There are plenty of people who suggest that stressful situations can in effect, assist manifestations somewhat. I mean, poltergeist cases, people focusing on, that kind of
Yeah.
thing, and whether it's true or not, who knows. But do you feel that, you said that it doesn't go from house to house with you, so it's necessarily you yourself, but do you feel when those stressful situations are happening, do you feel that is something that could act as a catalyst? Because undoubtedly, losing your husband would have been a stressful situation, beyond stress.
Yeah. Yeah, that was 11 years ago.
Right.
And then I moved into this house 9 years ago. But I am very happily married again now. We've been
Yeah.
married a year and together for 7 years, my husband Martin. Um, I don't think there's anything in our life apart from everybody wishing they had more money in the bank. There's nothing. We don't have any issues in our relationship. It's happy. We did have a flood in the kitchen.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a little bit stressful
Yeah.
that the floor needs doing, but I'm quite grounded. I just say, well, the kitchen floor was getting on a bit, even though it was nice solid wood. Let's just move on and say it had its life and, time to change. But there's nothing really I would say that is causing stress apart from the vicious cycle of the activity and us, maybe having a reaction to it. But beforehand, I mean, 9 years worth of log data of visual appearances, things moving, apportations, reapportations, you name it. We've had it. Voices, man's voice, a woman's voice, coughing, everything and anything. And we've started to catch things on cameras.
Right.
Um, Very weird, anomalous stuff, but nothing really bothered us. One thing did a long time ago. That was probably about 2 years ago now. It was an apportation that happened, and it was kind of odd at the time, but it bothered me for a few hours, and then that was it. So nothing really has been unpleasant, and the feeling of the house is very nice, and it's very homely and warming. It's just in the last couple of weeks, and I don't know if it's anything to do because I'm very big on environmentals. I don't know if it's anything to do with the environmentals changing that we've had this prolonged period of dry, and all of a sudden in the last couple of weeks it started to rain. And now is that causing activity to shift or something? Because we don't know what causes paranormal activity. Is that like a major impact that's causing stuff in the house?
I mean, it could be. It's interesting. It's interesting you mention all the things there, actually. So, okay, first of all, you mentioned first of all that the people before you in this property experience things. So we might take from that locations are certainly important, obviously. Now whether that's a building and the stone tape theory and things, whether it's the geology of the actual ground itself, the electromagnetic energy, things like that. You also mentioned weather there, and I've never actually thought of it like that. But what I do know is that in and again we're jumping into other areas of the paranormal, in say Bigfoot encounters or speculative Bigfoot encounters or UFO sightings, even strange disappearances, quite often there's a bizarre change in the weather. And people
Mm.
can't explain this. Yeah, and I mean seriously bizarre from sunny to blizzard, And so maybe there's something to it. Like you say, maybe the weather changing it affects the electromagnetic energies around, and that reacts with with the buildings, with the geology. So I guess what I'm getting to is, and I've kind of answered this out for you. Do you think locations are actually very important in paranormal manifestations? Like you say, they seem confined to certain hotspots or areas.
Um, I do think that locations are, specifically if people have managed to log data over that time. So if it's a new property, for example, that's been built, it doesn't mean to say that dismisses it at all from locational risks of it being more highly paranormal. Not at all. I do think that some locations, fault lines, I'm not so sure. I Because obviously if you've got ley lines, some people would believe that ley lines are responsible. Again, there's nothing proven in scientific rigor to say that ley lines have an impact environmentally or in increasing activity. But we are dealing with the paranormal, and the word itself is outside of the norm.
Absolutely.
So we do have to have a very open mind, yet being grounded and scientific at the same time.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you there. I mean, what I want to take away when you mention about keeping data, one of the things that I speak to a lot of people about is that the paranormal, and like you say, that just means something that's not explained by science, outside of the norm. So it's pretty much all around us, really. It is exactly that. It's happening all the time, but people, like you say, don't log these things. It's silly, and it can
Mm.
be silly things. Like, for example, my wife has a pine cone, set of pine cones out on our front door. Uh, Last few weeks, we found that positioned in various different places, not just tipped over by the wind, bopped up on the post of the garden and things like that. So we've kind of brought it. It's actually over there, sitting on the shelf over there. I'm thinking, we'll see if that actually moves again. Now I've brought it in, but most people wouldn't even log that as something to take note of. For example, within that happening, I also found a couple of coins, bizarrely, not coppers, foreign coins. I've no idea where they've come from on my doorstep. I am involved
Ooh.
in doing some investigations at the minute, or certainly research, should I say. So all that's kind of in my mind thinking, that's in the port, and why is that there? And should I take it in the house? Should I not? So do you find then, do you think that if people took more note of these type of things, even just deja vu, recurring dreams, we might be able to build up more data and get to the bottom of, or at least part way to the bottom of the paranormal world?
Well, let's split those down. So, if you're talking about apportations and things moving, absolutely that you need to log things, even if it's a one-off that you think anything odd or anomalous that you can add to some odd behavior that's been happening within the home. Like just before I came downstairs a minute ago to come and log on, I've got a chair next to me here, it's part of the dining table that I keep that one there so I can chat to anybody that wants to sit while I'm working.
Yeah.
And it had been moved a good 2 foot. So I would say, well, you know, and it didn't just get slid forward against the wall. There was no marks on the carpet to show that it was slid forward, but it was placed over the wire. So my electric wire from my computer, I haven't got my ring light in for doing production stuff. That's in the corner.
Mm.
But it had been placed over the wire. And I thought, well, who's done that? It's only me and Martin in the house. So, but that will go on my log. And in that log, it's really important to put things like who's in the house, the day, the time, the room that it happened, and maybe a video so that it can be explained a little bit better, and then keep that and add that to the log. So, yes, data, even if you think it's a one off, because if you
Mm.
start looking at patterns,
Yeah.
then you can say, well, actually, every morning that chair's out of sync now and it's never where it should be. So you can start locating patterns. Or does it just happen on a weekend, maybe when you've got, I don't know, people's circumstances? They might be a blended family. So is it happening when the stepchildren are coming over? Can you account for anyone else being in the house? Is it during times of turbulence within the family dynamics? So this type of stuff is what you need to log and look at. As for deja vu, I kind of scientifically have explained that one away.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I know
it's
what you're going to say.
to do with the brain synapses,
Yeah.
where they fire at different rates, and the eye reading the information coming in is slightly off kilter with the other one, which makes you think that you've done it again. So yeah, scientifically, I think we have a good explanation why that might occur.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. I mean, I know I've spoke to a couple of spirit guides, not spirit guides, should I say, mediums or in touch with spirit guides, and,
Mm.
and I know they will put another argument forward, but it is a compelling argument on the scientific side of things, as you say, the signals crashing into each other. I can buy that. Still slightly open-minded to the other, but I get where you're coming from there. But yeah, I mean, as
Yeah.
you say, taking note of data, it does seem to be important there, and it's like Steve always says as well, and I don't know what you think about this. They always, if you've got a presence, no, whatever that is, whether it's an intelligence or a spirit or whatever you're dealing with, they tend to do things that you are going to notice. They're not just going to move
Mm.
something in a book that's slightly adrift and you're not going to pick up on it. They'll, like you said, that chair was placed on the wire, so you would notice that immediately. Do you find that is the
Yeah.
case, that is like almost clear attempts at communication of some kind or another?
Yes, but what is that communication in aid of? Because I'm not, in 9 years of being here, Marcus, I haven't been given any what I would call intelligent communication to say,
Okay.
here's the winning lottery numbers. We have tried, by the way, in
Right.
experiments here with the team, scientifically putting numbers available for random generating numbers. And we all put bets on because we thought, right, this is it. We can't miss it in case. No, they were far from it. Not even one number came in. So they're not good at helping to pass information through. But we are onto something in the house. We've got the best people in the country helping, look into things and investigate. And have you heard of Andy Guy?
I'll be honest. No, I'll be honest. That's a new name on me. So,
Yeah, I recommend him to come onto your
okay.
podcast. He invents equipment for looking at things, but in an environmental scientific, not your here's an EMF woo woo, MK2 kind of thing that the lights are going to go off when your phone rings, or if a
Right.
taxi drives by with their radio on. So he legitimately has bits of equipment that he is pulling together, particularly for our house. And the two
Right.
things that I noticed before he started being involved was humidity and atmospheric pressure. These two have a massive, like spike when we have activity here in the house. But I wouldn't have known, because it's not something that I own, until Andy brought it, is that he brought a Geiger counter.
Right.
And we have anomalies with the Geiger counter when we have activities come through and when they occur. So he's creating a piece of equipment that's going to be looking into the specifics that we find are anomalous when we have things happen. I have got bits of equipment that I have in the house. So let me get it for you.
Okay.
This is in this room because this room's one of the most busy and active. It's just something you can buy off the screen, off of Amazon. It's a Govee.
Okay.
Other makes are available.
Okay.
And it sends all of the information to a phone app, and then if I have an anomalous occurrence, I go in and take a screenshot and see if I can see any spikes. And we are seeing quite a lot of different bits and pieces that we can link, like atmospheric pressure. That's a big one, more than EMF that I've found necessarily. But now we have this anomalous activity with the Geiger counter.
Hmm.
So, and it's like when we ask for something to happen or something does happen and we make note of it, the Geiger counter stops, like something blocks that radioactivity.
Right.
And, everybody who's into anomalous investigating will know that you can't necessarily block activity from background radiation. It's there, it's present all the time. And it's very strange. It's almost like somebody puts a Faraday cage over the top of us.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's interesting that, excuse me, that you find these things, and you say you find Geiger counters reacting in paranormal situations. You obviously find them in UFO situations. So you mentioned patterns. That's something that I love looking at. The smell of sulfur, for example, in paranormal encounters, which comes up in Bigfoot encounters, UFOs again. So what I'm just thinking out loud really is, for example, I've no doubt that one day science will explain the paranormal one way or another. I do believe that. I suppose
Mm.
what I'm saying is, though, that, for example, science is already looking at the possibility of other dimensions. And I know that's not necessarily other dimensions in a science fiction type of way, but other dimensions nonetheless. And so I'm kind of wondering, you mentioning atmospheric changes, electromagnetic energy. Is it kind of tapping into some kind of interdimensional overlap, like a radio signal almost? But is this
Yeah.
what these voices are? So, are you thinking along those lines too, that science will one day uncover what all this is about?
Yeah, well, if you look at the way we've forged forward in science, not only in the paranormal, but things like health and medical, we've forged forward, and our understanding has progressed. Obviously, and our knowledge of things can happen quite overnight. I can remember being a child and watching an episode of Star Trek, because obviously we only had two channels back then.
Yeah.
You were limited to what you could watch. And there were people, Lieutenant Uhura, I think her name was, that was on the deck of the Star Trek, and she was swiping the screen, touching things in midair. And I'm just going, as a kid, that's never going to happen. And look, we've all got that
Yeah, yeah,
here
yeah.
in our own phones that we have. Everything that we do now is at that level, and it's mind blowing how far we have progressed. So, do I think that we will have answers? I'm hoping we do. Maybe not in my lifetime, but maybe, because I do think we are forging forward. My team and I are passionate about investigating scientifically, and logging data. So if nothing else, at least we're going to be leaving some legacy behind us to help, I think, because we literally do 2 investigations a month, in-depth ones. Yeah.
I mean,
Some are private cases. Some are ones that we hire, buildings that we go to see what we can get long term, maybe 1 visit a year. In January, we're going back to Jamaica Inn. We tend to have really, really good visits there, and we're quite productive with stuff that we capture. Some of it's blown our mind. So yeah, I do think if people are persistent and they have the same methodology, I don't see how we won't be able to find some kind of link if people monitor and record data.
yeah, I mean, and you mentioned there about, just making a dent into it. It's such a mammoth subject, and especially when you do drag in all these other various fields of interest, such as whether it is UFOs, whether it's cryptids or whatever it might be. It takes more than one research or more than one research team. Ultimately, I think everybody does have to work together and share information. And like you say, the same methodology as well, because undoubtedly, if you don't do that, you're going to come to different results. You'll know that better than me. But I do feel that all these different research and all these different areas do need to find at some point down the line a way of coming together, because I do think, as much as science will explain it, I do think there's ideas outside of science that science almost has to catch up with, if that makes sense. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, you mentioned you work on cases. This leads me into our next question, really. Obviously, none of us have got answers at the minute, so you'd be perplexed at all of them. But are there any cases that have really left you just really perplexed and a bit like, wow, I don't even know where to begin with this?
Yes. So, like, I've got a magazine article coming out tomorrow I think it's tomorrow, in Haunted magazine, and we talk about cases about hoaxing, because all cases that come to us have an element of either misunderstanding, where people don't understand what it is that's happening in their home, and it can be easily explained away. Misdirection, where somebody intends to take you on a different trip and make you think that something is happening that it's not. And I do discuss a few cases that we had in there, but there is still one case that leaves us a little bit mind blown, to be honest with you. And it was in Sherborne in Dorset. And I will pen to paper and write that one up in a book, because it's just so vast. And the stuff that happened, if I said it out loud, people would actually think that I was nuts.
Okay.
That good statement that my mum used to say to me as a kid. It's bizarre, but it's logged, it's recorded, it's captured on camera. But despite having such high level activity in this house, there was an element of hoaxing, total outright hoaxing.
Right.
And forget the hoaxing, because we've managed to work through that. But the stuff that was left behind that we haven't been able to explain, that still remains in that box of the unexplained. It's just mind-blowing stuff. On that case, we had two ex-police officers at that point, a psychotherapist, you name it. We had grounded, intelligent people who investigated and who did stuff like this for a living. Yet, towards the end of one of the evenings, experimenting, everybody had this really weird thing. Either they were pushed, thrown up against the wall with force, kind of thing, or overcome with such unwell feeling, sorry, that their nose bled, or they went to vomit. So how can that happen? It went from one person to the next. 2 got shoved. My hair got pulled really kind of forcefully on the ponytail. And a lady rushed off to vomit, and another one had her nosebleed. And it's just like, what caused that? Even high EMF to that level, yes, we know that it can leave scratches on your body. Yes, we know that it can give you a feeling of paranoia, and it can give you goosebumps on your arms, and it has an impact on you, on your, the physical of workings of your body. We know that it does, but to the level that it did, what caused something to be that high EMF, if it was, to cause those reactions? And, you know, grounded ex-police officers and, like I say, psychotherapists are still there going, don't know what happened. So that one is still in the unexplained. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely fascinating. I mean, you mentioned there about, you know, how I'm trying to say it's in people's minds. How do I word this? For example, I'm obsessed with the human mind. I bang on about it all the time, you know, and I do believe, again, as much as I just said about science, I think the human mind and what little we understand about it now, as we learn more, we'll probably find that, again, that's going to have a big part to play in understanding all of this anomalous activity. So, you know, for example, you might feel overwhelmed and you might feel you could even come out in stigmata, for example, through the power of the mind. I accept that. But that wouldn't explain, as you say, having your hair physically tugged. So I suppose what I'm saying is that if the mind is responsible for this, and yet it's still, is it almost responsible for manifesting this energy in a physical form? Somehow the subconscious mind, you know, if you get 4 people in a dark space, for example, that feed's amplified and amplified. Could the mind, I know that people have experimented with this to very, very, well, not even limited success, just experimented and not really got anywhere with it, but could that be explained by science one day, that the human mind maybe could bring something?
I could say yes in certain circumstances. For example, if you're all sat there holding hands, trying to create a seance, and somebody was feeding and, you know, causing feed into the situation where people were beginning to fear, where they were saying, oh, I'm feeling this. You can have psychosuggestion, I guess, where you think that the same thing's happening. We've tried that experiment without telling a couple of the team, and I've gone, oh, you know, something's touching my head, and another one then goes, oh, something's touching my head, but you know that you've tried psychosuggestion. But in this occasion, they were looking for the homeowner to do an experiment. There was no physical experiment undergoing at that time. And somebody was cross that he'd gone out for a cigarette, and he should have been in the kitchen doing this, and just went to look for him. So no, and it was almost as if, you know, her going out and challenging, where are you, had caused this huge energy to go round the room, because it started off in the front room, hair being pulled. Right. And as she went through the door, she got kicked in the leg, the back of the leg, and she fell forward. Another woman ran out to vomit. The 2 guys went to, they got pushed against the wall, and then the nosebleed, in that order. It went doosh, 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 quickly round the room. There was no time for anyone to say, well, I'm feeling this or I'm feeling that. And it was just like somebody had rolled a bowling ball into the middle of the room.
Yeah, it almost sounds like an extreme version of subconscious suggestion. That is very bizarre. I mean, I'm just trying to come up with a rationalization, an explanation or suggestion of one on the spot. But it would leave me walking away from that really thinking I've just seen something completely out of the norm that's unexplainable. Yeah. So, I mean,
it took us a long time to openly discuss it.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I mean, I'm on 2 minds whether to say, can you cut it from the recording?
No, I think we're fine. Well, I would if you wanted me to, but I think our audience would love that, to be honest with you.
It's mind-blowing. I'm rational, Marcus. I'm a rational person. I was a police officer for 10.5 years, 11 years. I can't explain what happened, and neither can anybody else in that situation. The nearest explanation we have is that there's high EMF, because it was an area of concern with an EMF reading, but not the highest. We had 64 milligauss on the steps going up to the bedroom, which a lot of the visual occurrences were claimed to have happened. So we can put that down to high EMF. There's too much to go into here, but electronically, when we were doing EMF testing, you know, you will always have a emission from the box, the electric box, and it would read at a certain amount at a certain place. Well, at one point, the emissions stopped and there was nothing there, at the same time that there was a huge activity. Again, I'm not going to discuss what it was that we heard. And it was almost as if something had stopped that, natural out outsource of, remedial electric in the area, and it was weird. Outside there was, I think it was a phone wire or a low level electric wire coming into the house, and outside the electric EMF readings were horrendous. So it's no wonder these people were experiencing stuff and seeing stuff. We could explain away certain parts of it. In other parts of the house, the EMF was basic reading of no more than 4 on milligauss. So some of the rooms were 0.4. So I don't know. But the kitchen was one of the areas that had high EMF readings where they were stood. So the only thing we could put it down to was that there was maybe a pulsation of electric. And when we finished our investigations, we encouraged them to get the electric board in to test the electrics, and not just what was in the house, what was coming into the house. Because if you have more than 240 coming in, obviously it can increase like pulsations and cause items of electric to blow within the house. The same as if you're not getting enough power. We here in this house, we were having a disco with the lights above me now when you put them on, and the ones in the front room, and they would just dance for no reason. And we're sitting there doing the carianics, like they're back kind of thing. But when we tested the electrics, and everything was fine, because when I moved in 9 years ago, I had all of the electrics done. It's a complete refurbishment, the house.
Right.
And so I knew all the electrics were fine. But what was coming in was 190 coming into the house. So obviously we were having things blow on that level as well, and fusing and tripping of the switches because there wasn't enough electric coming into the house, causing the lights to flash. So yes, electrics coming in can have a massive impact, which is why you need to go down every route when you're investigating and be completely methodical, as I say, and make sure that you check all avenues, including your incoming quantity of faults into the house.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, electric is most certainly important, and in all of this, and the energies, frequencies. I think it was Tesla said if you want to understand the world, you need to understand frequency, vibration, energy, something along those lines.
Yeah.
So again, what it kind of makes me think is with these increases in electrical energy, whether it's having an effect on the human mind, and again whether that could possibly cause, even if you want to call it a group hallucination, and that sounds like a rational explanation, but to me what that suggests is the human mind's much more complex than we actually know. Certainly the subconscious human mind could be. So I think that's I think, as you say, I think electrical energy and frequency will prove to be important when we look to examine the paranormal world. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on connections to other cases with all this in mind? Because, or not other cases, other areas of interest. For example, in poltergeist cases or just general hauntings, people experience very similar activity to people who eventually go on to discover they've been abducted by aliens, or at least they claim they have. Such things as shadow people, strange noises in the house, electrical equipment, for example, malfunctioning in their presence, strange noises, hooded figures. These show up in alien abduction cases as much as they show up in paranormal cases, or what we would think of as paranormal cases. What are your thoughts on that? Have you ever come across any of that in your investigations where people are experiencing both of these phenomena?
Yeah, we have had some people claiming that they have these multiple across the different types. Yes. Do you know, I didn't answer your question earlier, and apologies about that. On the Serious Strange podcast that we run on the ASAP platform, do you know, I think over the last, I would say 2 months, apart from the last maybe week or two, we seem to have had all the speakers touch on there being a crossover between all of the investigations and all of the different types of activity within the paranormal. And most of them, and I'm not just talking lay people, we have people from the brightest minds across the UK come and talk for us, including educated academics as well as lay people. And they've been all touching on the idea and possibilities of a multiverse.
Right. Yes. Yes.
So And I'm not adverse to being open to listen to suggestions, so much so that's people who've been shunned in scientific rigor, like Sheldrake.
Mm.
So for some of his investigations and science methodology, he hasn't been proven, but he gives a theory that's reasonable. And do we start reading stuff that comes down rabbit holes more and listening to certain things? Because had you have asked me my thoughts and feelings about UFOs a few years ago, I
Mm.
probably would have just said, it's up there with God that it's not been proven. So we'll just keep an open mind and leave it out there as people having their type of own experience. But some of the people that I've spoken to are very, what we would call in the police, A1 witnesses.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you have grounded, intelligent, intellectual, trusted people in the community who have seen and experienced these kind of things. You know, where do we go with this? We can't dismiss rational people, especially on their duty, where police officers have called in
Yeah,
other people to come and help with things that's anomalous when they're working. They have to be credible. They have to be deemed as being credible
yeah.
because of the position that they hold in the community. So yeah, by all means, I'm open. I want answers as much as the next investigator. So if I completely shut my thought process off and don't have an openness, then I shouldn't be doing investigating.
Yeah, no, I agree with you what you said there. Just we'll go back to the previous question in a moment, but you mentioned the multiverse there. I mean, this is obviously all quantum physics, quantum mechanics. What I find interesting about the multiverse, and this is something I still find it bizarre now, and I certainly found it bizarre, like you said a few years ago, is the notion that we're living in, the simulation theory. We're living in a computer simulation. I think that's preposterous. But when you read about the multiverse, nobody's quite saying this is a fact. But in theory, they're giving you compelling explanations of why that could, in theory, be true. So yeah, the ideas that are coming through that were on the fringe years ago are kind of getting dragged into the mainstream. I suppose that's what I mean about science catching up at times. I don't know what your thoughts are on the simulation theory. I didn't plan to speak about that. I don't know what my thoughts are, but I mean, feel free to give me a few thoughts if you wish. But yeah, I would like to know as well about if you have found people who have experienced ghosts, UFOs, aliens within the same encounter, I suppose, or case.
I haven't experienced any myself in cases that I've had that they've said ghosts and UFOs per se at the same time.
Okay.
Not me personally. Um, I I do, however, believe that there is through our investigations and personal experiences, I do believe that poltergeist comes hand in hand with your normal haunting.
Okay.
Now, what comes first? I mean, you can go back and read one of my previous magazine articles where it's signs of a poltergeist, and I actually lay this out quite quickly because it's very specific. Some of the behaviour of a poltergeist, but there is a crossover between a haunting and also poltergeist, and it's trying to determine which is which. So I do think that within the realms of a poltergeist type activity that's being claimed, there will be another haunting alongside it. Now, what attracts what? Because for me, poltergeist is not something that can interact with you per se. You're not going to have necessarily an EVP that comes up and you say, "What's your name?" and you clearly get Jane. That doesn't happen. It's an energy born from a person, as you know, centered person, and there is specific things that can identify them, but after you've logged data, after you've gone down through specifics of discounting certain things, you can, if you look at this over a long period of time, get that information, because poltergeist type activity is something that is very well recorded
Yeah, yeah.
because of it being so unusual. And this is where you get the data.
Hmm.
Your normal Aunt Edna who comes in and once a year and says, "Hello, I'm here just to remind you,"
Yeah,
and
yeah.
she leaves her smell of perfume as you see her walk through your front room. Um, other aunties are available, as
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
said before.
Mm-hmm.
But this is it's different types of behavior and different types of activity. So because of its unusual type and its repeatability, it gets logged and people have data, which is why I think it's out there more than just a normal haunting, why people fixate on poltergeist. And I've been lucky to deal with 3 cases of poltergeist activity. So, and over prolonged periods of investigating and research into it. So I have been able to get my head around quite a lot of the similarities that happen. And as you asked me before, why are there similarities in poltergeists? If it is centre born from the person, our bodies, are emitting this energy that comes from us. Obviously, we're going to be capable of doing certain things. So we're all going to have the same capabilities, being made up of the same individual items of water, bone, tissue, and electrical impulses on your muscles. I think what's helped me to get grips with everything, 'cause Martin's a psychotherapist, my husband psychotherapist, and I'm a trained sports therapist.
Yeah, okay.
And I've just retired this year so that I can concentrate on the writing and stuff. So obviously I've studied electrical impulses and nerve impulses in the body to quite high level, that I understand how they interact with muscles and also how mental health has an impact physically on the body. So this helps us to understand the person within the person-centered energy that's created. So yes, I do think that it is possible to have similarities of what it is, because we are made up of the same stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably going to go off on a little bit one here just to explain how I get to my next question. But yeah, I mean, I think I agree here with you. As you say, it's the human mind, it's the person. So if they're, that will result in similarities. I know that there are some researchers, including my co-host Steve, and they've done extensive research on this for decades, for some time, and they will believe that this phenomenon, they'll call it, or the other, whether it's a poltergeist, a ghost, or an alien, whatever you want to call it, it's basically it all comes from the same thing. They will tell you. It's the same source, and it's manifesting in different ways. It's wearing different masks. I
Yeah.
differ slightly. I do kind of suspect that they might have identified some kind of intelligence or some kind of energy, but I kind of feel that instead of everything being connected, what we're seeing is it's the same mechanism. So, for example, whatever's responsible for allowing UFOs to be seen, whatever they might be, it's the same for allowing poltergeists to come through. It's the same for allowing whatever all this stuff is.
Yeah.
And so within that, I'm going back to the human mind. What I'm going to get at here is that it's almost as if like it's local news for local populations. What you will experience and see is almost what is within your own perception to begin with. And that's not to say that this energy isn't real. It's just manifesting in a way that you can understand it. Have you come across anything like any theories of this nature? Have you explored any theories of that kind of thinking?
Well, with our own stuff that's going on in the house, we are really digging in deep and rabbit hole diving, deep diving into quantum physics. And we're trying to read as many papers as we can. Like I say, do you know what? My whole of my life journey in the paranormal changed when I watched the twin slit experiment.
I was reading about this literally only this morning. I know exactly what you're referring to.
So years ago, somebody said to me, "Have you watched the twin slit experiment?" It must have been 12 years ago, and I went, "No, what is it?" And they said, "Just go and have a watch of it." This guy, he's Middle Eastern, his name. It's just slipped my name. I think it ends in Ali. Um, I can find that for you so that we can maybe put a clip
Flash
in.
something on me.
If you go to look for the actual experiment that he's describing and explaining, look for the one that he's doing a talk in the university to he's lecturing, because that's the best one that you can find. Oh my God, it totally blew my mind to think that whatever it is that's occurring for us to be able to have anomalous phenomena knows when you're watching.
Yeah, to be observed.
And then a follow-on to that, obviously, you then have Sheldrake later in the 70s, but there's another chap before Sheldrake who came along who did the investigations into the art of being seen or being watched. So, you know, and Cal Cooper was the latest to do the being watched project. So it's all stuff, I'm sure, that comes down to our inner workings of how we're built, how we're made up, how the brain is. If you want to go down your fight or flight or your primeval part of your brain that was responsible for keeping you safe when there was dinosaurs around, I don't know where it comes from, what part of your brain you know when you're being watched, but you do. You
Yeah.
have a feeling that there's
Mhm.
something there, and then you turn around and somebody's looking at you, and it's bizarre. How do we tap into this?
Mm.
I don't know. I'm not that, you know, my science and my methodology of the brain working is only to a medical rehabilitation level. It's not to, you know, psychotherapist kind of level, which is where Martin comes in. But yeah, it's incredible. So that's where everything for me changed. And the thought that they can see us, maybe, you know, well, not maybe, it's been scientifically proved that the twin slit experiment, atoms, you know, and all that kind of stuff, know when they're being fired, they know when they're being watched, and they behave differently and they behave very oddly. And it's been set up over time to recreate the same experiment, and they have exactly the same results. So through quantum science, and, you know, we know that whatever it is, whatever energy is out there, knows when it's being watched. But if you dig deeper and you dive deeper, you go into we were reading something in quantum mechanics the other week about the spaces between atoms. Now, if you're going to hide, you know, even this glass, it's a solid object.
Yeah.
It's all made up with tiny particles and sand made into glass. And each between those particles, you've obviously got a tiny little gap. What if your poltergeist or your alien or your paranormal activity? This is not my thought process, by the way. I just want to say this was this paper.
Yeah.
What if they hide between atoms? There's not a hope in hell that we're going to spot them.
It's a fascinating suggestion, though, isn't it? It really is, because it just shows you how little we understand about our very reality. And at the same time, if science was to explain that, it doesn't make it any less fascinating either. You know, that
No.
there is some kind of, don't use the word intelligence, but it almost does appear like that, like you say, you know, because, okay, so, but we have had cases that people have recorded. I was speaking to a chap the other day, and he is a Dan, and he has a spirit guide, and he speaks to it every single day, you know, and he's a perfectly sane man. And so we might ask, so what is that then? Is that an intelligence from the other side, or is it his brain that's kind of just tapping into some kind of energy that we don't really know exists? I mean, it's just absolutely fascinating. I mean, where do you see
Yeah, I mean,
huge?
I
Oh, go
don't
on.
think that we actually put enough effort into rigorously testing
I agree.
mediumship.
I agree.
Um, you know, I think that maybe we could, I mean, even an ASAP, I mean, I'm no longer a director there, but if I made a suggestion that we carried out some kind of, you know, agreed testing as a project to see if we could complete certain tasks, and do that on a regular basis to see if we could repeat things as well, we might start learning a little bit more. I know it's done in universities.
Mm.
I know of some academics that have covered this, but I don't think it's a popular enough thing that's being covered enough. But when you
Yeah.
get people who read The Room, for example, and read people for mediumship, I don't mean cold read them. I mean, as in, how do you know when they go there and they get their message? If this person, I'm saying if they
Mm.
are genuine, how do we know that they're not just using a form of mind reading to read what that person is thinking, but
Oh
they
yeah,
have that
yeah.
ability to do that rather than there being a spirit coming through your great aunt Mabel again? So
Yeah.
how do we know that it's not a form of mind reading?
You know, I want to make it clear. I mean, I completely agree with you on this. And to be fair, mind reading would again be a fascinating subject in itself. How on earth can you do that? But when I speak about mediumships, and I was speaking to Steve about this actually a few weeks ago, like you say, when you've got, I don't know, Psychic Diane down the road at local pub, I don't put much weight in people like that for everything you've just said. And also, there's well-known tricks, your name's on the tickets, or they'll do social media, so blah, 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 blah. So, no, I disregard them almost immediately. However, there are other people that don't readings with spiritualist churches. I was walking down the road in my home city with my then fiance, who I'm married to now, and this lady just walked out of nowhere. I couldn't even tell you where she came from. Approached me, and I want not to tell you what she said, but she about a 30-second little speech at me, and then she disappeared. And some aspects of that have actually happened. Even when I forgot about that actually happening, I thought, oh, God, they're that woman. So people like that, yeah, I wouldn't say I believe, because I hate that word, but I suspect they are tapping into something. However, the mediums that you mentioned, and your working men's club mediums, no, I think they're highly suspicious. Going back to what you said though about there's not enough rigorous testing. This chap I was speaking about, he was saying the same thing. He was saying he's calling out for people to scientifically test him under any conditions people want, because he wants to prove that he's telling the truth, basically. So who knows? Maybe I can put you in touch, because he's desperate for that to happen, and I think that's the only way we can actually get to the bottom of it. If, like you say, if science takes things seriously enough to actually test them properly and log the data. So I mean, do you envision that happening? Because there is a shift. The paranormal seems to be a bit more popular now, generally speaking, within the wider populace, and that can sometimes be a bad thing, when you get silly shows cropping up on television and things. But do you feel that science will take this a bit more seriously, especially now we're in the age of quantum mechanics, where there's answers to be found, basically?
I'd like to hope that they will at some point, but it's probably money and funding. So we need to have some rich uncle who's just won a huge amount on the lottery that's going to fund this, because if you're going to go and do this as something serious, as something that's going to be repeated, you really need to have a medical link into something that can actually provide you with the caps that have the probes that go on the brain. So when they're undergoing certain experiments, you can see which parts of the brain are tapping in, maybe scanning at the same time. I don't know, but I mean, just have somebody cold in a room to do remote viewing is one thing. But if you're going to be looking at whether this information that's receiving, so the receiving of the information is through telepathic methods rather than through a ghost, a past relative, I think you do need to have some medical intervention where they can professionally check the brain activity at the same time.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I completely agree, and I mean, I would love to see this, because, as I say, like, and again, it's going to take across the board sort of situation where you've got people from different fields of interest, different experts, and it's going to be a mix between non-academic and academic. It has to be that way, I think. So yeah, I do hope that happens. Now, how do I word this? I do hope that happens, yeah, and I do think that that's the only way we'll get to the bottom of things. Do you feel that there's not an effort to cover up, because I don't want to get down a conspiracy route, but for example, I was good friends with a chap who was married to an archaeologist, and he said that on numerous occasions she would say, not there's a cover up of information, but if they can't explain something they find, they will just hide it away in the back, not in a nasty way, but say, we're not going to put on display till it's peer reviewed, or till we know more about it. And a lot of the times she did hint that it basically means they're having to rewrite things. Do you feel there's a danger of that from science? You mentioned it there about funding. A lot of people, certainly in the past, have been afraid to actually go down certain routes, to experiment with certain things, even to say certain things. John Mack, for example, was vilified, and he had a extensively, bona fide background behind him. Do you feel there's a bit of not a looking down the nose, but do you feel science could be its own worst enemy in that respect, that it might not be as open as they perhaps should be?
I think science and medical has that problem across the board. Right. So even for things like cancer and stuff like that, they're not throwing enough funding in the right areas that maybe they could do. So if we're short to an extent that we are, that we can't, eradicate certain illnesses from humanity, then they're not going to be looking at this type of thing, to be honest with you. And it's not just medical science, it's across the board. If things are going to be too difficult, they won't give you that information. Police cases, I know that there's a high profile case of that's happened with murders years ago, and they've covered stuff up because it's just easier not to bring that to the forefront. And they leave stuff sat there thinking that more might come out and they'll be able to do another fuller investigation at a later date, with maybe another 10 items.
So they're not covering stuff up in terms of like an injustice, they're just withholding information back for future investigations, is what you're saying there.
With the intention to,
right.
But for example, I mean, I can share this with you. So I'm working on documentaries at the moment to do with some serial killers, and one of the things that's led me down is a chap called Sidney Cook,
okay.
who's a known and was known for being a grooming gang person, in a paedophile ring. Right. But he'd only gone to prison for grooming and sexual offences. I say only, I apologise to anybody. No. But the police were very aware that he'd actually been involved in murders. So they didn't pursue that until he came out of prison, arrested him straight away, and then took him to the location that I worked at. And we had him living with us for over 6 months in custody, while we were waiting to take him back to trial again. And I can't disclose any more than I have from where he was.
Yeah.
But for that, obviously, there are some injustices that happen. He went back to prison for the full, murders that he committed. But I do think that there possibly is more that hasn't been located and are still missing, that have gone unnoticed. But that might be something that will be highlighted in a future documentary. So I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but there are also some other police things that they had thought maybe it would cause more trauma to families still existing, that they left until they could find more information, and they haven't found that information, and then they haven't been able to get any more, to carry that forward. So it stayed as an injustice. I don't think it was intended at the beginning, but this happens across the board. So yes, medically, I don't think that they fully investigate stuff that they can because of funding, and hoping that something might come forward at a later date to provide them with the ability to be able to investigate, but it doesn't.
Yeah, so I think the important thing to take away from that is it isn't necessarily a malicious or sort of mindset that we're going to keep this. It's more, there's a lot more to it. It's a lot more nuanced, I suppose, as in life. So that's understandable. I mean, we need to wrap up in a little bit, but we've got a bit more to get through if we can. You mentioned you work with the police, and we've just been speaking about the police there. So, and again, I'm not meaning to make light of anything, so please don't think I am, but as far as I'm aware, the police will not entertain psychics, for example, in cases. However, I have spoken to a couple of police officers, certainly not high up, don't get me wrong, who say that behind closed doors, they'll not necessarily officially, but they will act on information, even if it's just looking at what they've been told. What are your thoughts on that? Have you ever witnessed anything like that? It comes up a lot. It just interests me to ask you, seeing as you'd be in the know of that kind of thing.
It depends on the individual, obviously, and who it is that you've got that's paying the bills at the end of the day. Right. So the mindset and the openness of your chief constable always will help. But I am aware, if there's a book out, and I love true crime. Yeah. If you want to read a really good book, and it's not paranormal, I know, but true crime, called The Jigsaw Man, it can tell you all into things where police have used psychics. And they have mentioned, they've touched on it on a couple of the things that's in there. I know that psychics have been used, not necessarily by the police, but by family in suggesting that they want to have this person involved. And obviously you have to then respect the family's wishes, being the victims in it. So yeah, they have been known to be used. Some have got a good hit rate.
Yeah, I mean, I was speaking to a chap again. I don't keep saying that all the time, but I was, and he was saying that this kind of thing is something that you could learn, like remote viewing. He mentioned that sometimes, like anything, some people are born great at football, some people can sing, some people probably are a bit more in tune than others, but it is something that everyone can learn. So if medical science can get a grip on what's happening in the paranormal world, these type of things like psychics, remote viewers, they could be valuable assets to police and even military. I mean, they already have been to militaries anyway. I don't know whether we'll ever see that happening in our lifetime, but it's certainly an interesting thought that, if you've got someone who can track somebody down and find missing children and God knows what else, there would be an invaluable asset there. I mean, do you think that will ever happen if medical science could prove it's a thing, or do you think we'll always...
Yeah, I mean, my memory of certain cases and certain books isn't always as good for pulling out the information that I need to at that time. 5 minutes later, and I'll think of it. But there was a university who did do remote viewing
yeah.
cases that they looked into, and I even think it might have even been Oxford University. Please don't 100% say that, but back in the 70s, it's been looked at, and also within the forces, they've undergone this, especially during the Cold War. Can they do remote viewing? And I think it was connected through that way, that they were looking into whether psychics could, glean information on Russia and stuff like this. So yeah, it has been looked into. It's not my chosen topic of subject that I really know much about. Like I say, ask me one on poltergeist or ghosts, and I can invariably answer it. But this is stuff that's taking me down the deep dive. And like I say, looking at poltergeist is taking me down Rupert Sheldrake's investigation into being watched and stuff like this. So, and Cal Cooper. And I already knew about his experiments, and he's somebody that I chat to, on a regular basis. So I love the stuff that he does, and I love the stuff that he produces and the investigations. Currently, he's doing one looking at remote viewing through, he'll probably tell me off for saying it's wrong, through going into the water, where you shut yourself off into a dark area that's got water, flotation tank, and he's looking at what he can come up with through thought process and visuals through that. And he's been experimenting with his students for a couple of years, 3 years, I think, doing that one now. So it'll be interesting to read his papers when they've been peer reviewed and released.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, the sensory deprivation thing, again, it comes back to the human mind in my mind, and just what what the potential power of it just could be. So you've touched on true crime. I know that you've got a great interest in true crime. There's a certain paranormal, crossover cases where, I'm not going to ask you about that, but, where you do have people who say that they're solved through mediumship, or they're solved through a ghost being that's giving them information, things like that. But what I'm going to get here is that, to me, unsolved mysteries, for example, true crime that's unsolved, they're just as anomalous as the paranormal world. So, one, do you see any connections in that sense between the two fields of interest? And do you have transferable skills from you work with the paranormal when you're working with true crime, even if just as a researcher?
Absolutely, 100%. I think I approach every single investigation and every case that I look into with a police officer's eyes and with a police officer's mindset. Absolutely. You have that thorough rigor and the methodology to how you approach. So first of all, the first thing I have that phone call from somebody and they say, this is what we're experiencing. You take a brief note and then you send the team out. So the team get there. What do? You interview them, you record what they say, you make a statement. You don't obviously get them to sign this statement, but you create your notes and then you send them your notes so that they are aware what it is. And, are there any things that you'd like to add to this, so that they are aware it's a living document. When things happen, what they say is going to go into the document, so it's kept current. So yeah, it's very much like a police record that would be, and statement taking. In big cases that we do, we've taken statements, and guess who's taken them? Well, that would be me, the ex-copper.
Right,
so
okay.
Sign this piece of paper to say that it's true to your belief, kind of thing. So yeah, there is ways that I've dealt 100%. And anybody who reads my articles in Haunted magazine will know that they've got a similarity. There's a start, there's a beginning, there's a middle, and then there's a conclusion at the end with what we can say is categorically true and what was repeatable. We've even had, I've even had experiences being in the police that I get called out, that people have called us and anomalous phenomena has happened. So there is a crossover between law enforcement and also odd stuff, because if odd stuff's happening and you can't explain it, you know, what is it that's going on? Is the thumping in the walls, or are you thinking that someone's trying to break into your house at 2 a.m?
Yeah, so I've never actually thought of it like that, actually, because like you say, if you're going to report something to someone, your first thought isn't going to get the phone book out and find your local ghost hunting. You know, you're going to kind of go to someone in authority, and that's going to be the police. So, yeah, I've never thought of it like that. Before we move to wrap up, are there any paranormal cases that, whether from the past, but there's two more things I'd like to ask you. I'll ask you this first. Is there any paranormal cases from the past that you wish you would have been a part of in terms of research and investigating? And that can either be just because it was so fascinating, you wish you could have seen it, and without getting you to kind of, you know, be nasty with people, but just because you thought the conclusion they arrived at was incorrect and you would like to have put your stamp on it. Is there anything that you look back on and you wish you could have been there?
Obviously, Harry Price, he had his finger on the pulse with quite a lot of stuff that he did, and I admire his tenacity and I admire the amount of cases that he covered. I think Borley Rectory probably would have been a good one, because I'm a little bit more grounded than I think that Harry Price was, because he obviously had a certain belief structure, as do I. I do think that with science that we have now and the technology that we have, some equipment, I would have been better placed to have maybe found what it was behind the anomalous phenomena. But it's just such a shame that that place burned down. Such a shame.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. So I suppose that conversation could go on and on forever. So you mentioned as well that when you first started researching the paranormal and things of that nature, you end up in areas you didn't even realize you were going to go down. I mean, we spoke before the show. I started researching UFOs, and I ended up researching ancient civilizations and folklore and things like that. Not that I didn't have an interest in, but I just didn't think were relevant to what I was doing. When you look at folklore and mythology and legends, it's clearly that the paranormal activity has been happening for thousands of years, because people are writing about it back then, whether they were writing about it in different ways, whether they were saying it was God and it was really a UFO or whatever. So do you think we can find clues almost in legends and folklore, possible explanations for what's happening in modern paranormal encounters?
I think maybe we can. I mean, there's a chap who is a senior, I think he's a senior lecturer at Liverpool, John Smalls, and we're writing a magazine article together.
Okay.
And we're looking into something. It's called well, I won't tell you too much because I don't want you all to know, but it's about the poltergeist that happened a couple hundred years ago. So we've got your academic and you've got your lay coming together through proper investigation. So we are taking it as if it was an investigation from the start, and looking at it in depth and seeing if we can come up with answers that weren't necessarily brought to the fore. So yes, recording, documenting stuff from a couple of hundred years ago could help to bring forward some answers, because even back then, people who are claiming of what it is that happened and the type of activity is not much different.
No, you're right. I mean, I tried to read a lot of older books on the paranormal, you know, particularly from the mid 1800s, which are not that old, but like you say, they are speaking of exactly the same things. The conclusions are slightly different, but that's with knowledge and things of that nature. And I completely agree. I think we should be looking over old cases with fresh eyes and fresh ideas and from a modern perspective. But Caroline, look, it's been absolutely fascinating speaking with you. I really, really do appreciate taking the time to join me. What have you got coming up? I mean, you've just mentioned there you've got lots of articles, books. I mean, what have you got coming up? The floor's yours for a minute.
So Martin and I are working on a couple of documentaries at the moment, and true crime being a couple of them, but we're also looking at doing something next year. So my business partner, who I think would really fit coming onto your program, Christian Lander, his knowledge of other paranormal stuff is far more superior to mine for things like UFOs and cryptids and stuff like that, and other anomalous phenomena. But we're looking at doing a road trip with Martin, my husband, him and me next year. We've just got a new platform that we're going to start running alongside Simply Strange, and it's called the Unearthly Bureau. So we're going to be starting in Scotland, coming all the way down through the whole of the UK, ending up in Cornwall, stopping off with people within the paranormal areas and giving them a chance to talk about something local to them, maybe having an investigation en route, stopping off at Parameet, John Moores University, with Rob Gandy and Mike Bembo Jackson en route, along other things. And we're going to put some of the stuff as daily content out as a podcast, and hopefully the rest will make it to TV for a series. So
That sounds,
fingers crossed.
yeah, that sounds fascinating. I can't wait to see that. Actually, that I already.
But if anyone wants to start a GoFundMe or perhaps help us with the funding, please just step forward for that one.
Okay, Caroline, that does sound fascinating. Thank you very much, Caroline, for joining me. It has absolutely been fascinating speaking with you. So thank you ever so much.
Likewise. Thank you very much for inviting me.
It's not a pleasure. Pleasure is all mine then. So thank you. And thank you guys for joining us. As always, make sure you subscribe to our channel. Make sure you follow us on social media and check out the Anomaly Project podcast.com for further articles, news and information. Until next time, goodbye and take care.